Good evening, everyone. We're going to talk about soil structure right now. My name is Reeves, and this is a continuation of our Basic Gardening Tips series. This is Module 5, Soil Structure. We're digging a hole right now just so that we can take a look at soil structure. I want to give you a little detail about what is soil structure. How's it formed? How is it maintained or preserved? Why is it important? What's it look like? So I'm digging a little core here of soil. I've got a transplanting shovel, or a spade would work nicely. And we're in a field. This is one of my garden fields that hasn't been planted for 2 years. You can see beautiful red clover, I think some timothy grass, alfalfa, dandelion. There's lots of activity going on here. So I wanted to take a core of soil just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about when I say soil structure. Soil, it can be really compacted, it can be really lofty, it can be really loose. It really just depends on what your parent materials are, sand, silt, clay, what the ratios of those 3 items are in your soil, those particles, those particulate matter. That's your parent material. It's made out of the rock, the geological rock that your soils are created from, that sand, silt, clay. So it'll have the chemical properties of that parent material. But soil structure is more of the physics of your soil. It's like the architecture of your soil. And so what we're looking at here are roots, aggregates, these little crumb structures in the soil. We see burrows and pores. We see spaces where water could be held and air could move down through the soil profile. This is a it's a silty clay loam, so it tends to be somewhat compacted and dense, high in organic matter. We're about 5% here, high in overall carbon. You can tell by the color of the soil that there's a decent amount of carbon in this soil. So all of those things are really great. But what is really important is this crumb structure, this porosity, these macro aggregates. And so what we're looking at is the work of bacteria, fungal organisms, and soil animals. Our earthworms play a huge role in creating this structure, in creating these burrows, pore spaces in the soil. Some earthworms are going to be top dwellers, more decomposers, that are going to break down the plant material, the detritus on the surface of the soil. Some earthworms are going to be really deep dwellers, and they're going to come up and grab some organic matter, and they're going to bring it down into their burrows, deeper down into the soil. All of that creates habitat for other organisms to exist and thrive. We need many habitats in the soil, and we need many organisms in the soil. All have their preferred moisture levels, oxygen levels, nutrient levels. And so a very diverse soil profile is ideal. This soil structure takes a very long time to be created. It's not something that can be created overnight, because so many of these pore structures, these root canals, where this root is growing through here, this plant will have died, and that root will have been decomposed, broken down. That canal will be reused by earthworms, little mites or beetles in the soil, other worms, earthworms, and the next root would reuse that canal. And so they are reinforced and reused perpetually, maintained in essence, formed and reformed, maintained by the glues or the excretions of earthworms, of bacteria, of fungal organisms. This is what allows nutrients to cycle. By having a soil that has a lot of structure, a lot of pore space, a lot of areas where oxygen can saturate, where water can saturate, anywhere where there's lots of water saturating a space, that pushes out the oxygen, that pushes out the atmosphere. So organisms that need low oxygen environments can survive in that area while it's saturated. Then if it recedes, if the water table recedes, then that gives an opportunity for the next suite of organisms to come and take over that location. The glues that the microorganisms use to hold this soil together, the soil structure together, that's food for the next organism. And so it's constantly being cycled, formed and broken down, formed and broken down. And if we don't maintain a constant flow of photosynthates, green plants, photosynthesizing, pumping their sugars down into the soil, feeding the microorganisms, then that soil structure breaks down. Those glues that holds the soil together, that structure together, gets consumed and broken down. It's carbon. It just gets eaten. So we need to make sure that we're respecting the structure of our soil. This is what allows the water to infiltrate, oxygen. When I say oxygen, I mean the atmosphere. The atmosphere recedes down into the soil profile. Every 24 hours, there's a cycle of in and out of the atmosphere. The soil breathes, and so that brings oxygen down with it, but 21% of our atmosphere is oxygen, 78% of our atmosphere is nitrogen. And so if we want to have a soil that is cycling nutrients well and feeding our plants well, we want to make sure that that atmosphere is able to recede into our soil profile, that nitrogen in the atmosphere is able to recede down in that soil profile and be fixed by microorganisms. Plants can't access that it's an into gas. Plants can't break that bond. They need the microorganisms that exist in those low oxygen environments in the soil to do that. All of the nutrients that are cycled out of the parent material and the organic matter and the exudates from the plants by microorganisms are then utilized and recycled back into the plants. This is the most important factor, in my opinion, for soil health and plant nutrition, is structure. We have a big role to play in making sure that our soil stays well structured. One of the primary ways that we can do that is to not break down this structure. This structure is broken down, one, when we don't have living green plants feeding the soil at all times. If we have bare soil, then the soil is oxidizing. If the soil is oxidizing, that means that anything that can volatilize, any of the elements that can volatilize will. And so that's your nitrogen. It's 78% of the atmosphere, so it can volatilize into a gas. It'll volatilize. When our soil oxidizes, it dries out, it becomes alkaline, it becomes inhospitable to a lot of the microorganisms that are necessary for providing some of the very trace elements to our plants. They need to have a low oxygen environment, something that is a little more, the term is reduced. And so low oxygen, a little more saturated, and just a nice microhabitat for them to be able to do their, it's called reduction. They take elements like manganese and cobalt and copper, and they take them from an oxidized form, iron, and reduce it down into a reduced form that plants can actually utilize. That's done by microbes. And so if we don't provide the habitat for those microbes to do that work, that means we have to do that work by feeding our plants a fertilizer. Nature has evolved to feed itself. And if we can honor that, observe those processes, and not destroy the structure that is in place in order for it to happen, we have less work to do in our garden, and we can do a lot more enjoying of our time in our garden, and less fretting about if our plants are being fed well, or if they are, if they are not getting what they need. And so soil structure is a major component in making sure that our plants are fed well and that we have less to do in the garden. This will be a way for us to maintain moisture. We have more water holding capacity. We have opportunity for microbes to do their work. We have earthworms doing their vertical tillage, making sure that they're maintaining the possibility for water infiltration, water percolation, so we are filling our groundwater, our aquifers. It's a win-win. So try not to let your soil be bare. Keep it covered at all times. Don't till. If you have a well-structured soil and you don't have a compaction zone that is a barrier for oxygen or water to infiltrate into your soil profile, don't till. If you do till, till very shallowly, 1 or 2 inches, just enough to get a seed bed, and then be aware that every time you do that, you're setting a compaction zone just below that tine, just below that tillage equipment. You're creating a compaction zone where water and air can no longer infiltrate, and earthworms aren't able to get back up through there. So that's soil structure. Our next module, we'll talk about how to make sure our worms are well fed.